mom called the sheriff's.
Yes, that's true. So we'll start this board meeting with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So our agenda, is it as it stands, or do we have any changes, comments, questions?
Just a note to everyone in the consent agenda. We did not have item K, the out of endorsement on there, and the reason that we're including that is simply as Cedars, which is the official record keeping system of the state, has not updated. So all of our course codes to make those people compliant, we changed. However, Cedars had not updated it. It still showed as last being updated on the 14th. So this is simply in case Cedars does not update by the time that we have to report to the state, in which case board approval would make us compliant. But I wanted to make sure the board was aware that that's the reason, because I've spoken to a couple of these folks and they do have their endorsements. They're just not coming through on OSPI yet.
Okay.
Other than that, no changes. So.
No other questions? Okay.
I'll move to approve tonight's agenda.
Second. Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Delegations, oh, I guess we should say that we're excusing Rick tonight. He's prayer commitment. Delegations,
I have no delegations this evening.
already. We'll move on to the consent agenda. As you mentioned, the out of endorsement is a potential.
Correct.
We're all good?
Yep. Good.
Any questions, comments? New English teacher. Bunch of new paras. Okay, well,
I'll move to approve the proposed consent agenda.
well, second. Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Right. Straight into public comments.
Nope.
How about
No electronic.
electronic? No? Okay, then we will recess our board meeting and we will move into a public hearing for our 22-23 budget extension. And we'll turn the time over to Mr. Rob.
Perfect, thank you, Dale. So for the 22-23 school year, we are looking to get approval on a budget extension for our general fund as well as our debt service fund. So I have a PowerPoint here. We're gonna go through and just kind of go through what we're looking at numbers wise, as well as why we're asking for an extension. So next slide.
Is Heidi running it?
Oh, there it is.
It
Oh,
changed
okay.
on the small computer, but it
Oh, did
didn't
it?
change on this one. Yeah. Very, very.
There we go.
There
it
you
is.
go.
Okay, so on this one, this slide, I took a look at what our current year expenditures were minus what we had budgeted for and kind of have our capacity number there. And then I try to project out expenditures kind of on the higher side with summer school. Then we have a few trainings for some staff coming up. And then national board payments are next month as well. Now I can tell you after June, I didn't have my June number. Or we didn't have AP and stuff wrapped up before I finished my PowerPoint. So actually June came out 42,000 lower than that this year. So that is capacity that we have to spend in other months. This will help us just be able to cover anything that we don't see coming. I feel pretty comfortable with the 900,000. I don't see us actually getting all the way using all of it. But it is capacity that I feel like we need. Next slide. So our proposal amount is to increase expenditures by 900,000, which will make our total allowed expenditures 24,830,837. This would, like I said, this will allow us to cover remaining expenditures and any unforeseen emergencies and expenses. The key to this is just because we are asking to increase the allowed expenditure amount does not mean we plan on spending the whole amount. Next slide. So one of the main things with the board is what does this do to our fund balance towards the end of the year? So current fund balance is 772,324.50 plus our projected revenue, which it's very conservative. And probably the most conservative area is our safety net funding that we had asked for. We had asked for, I think it was 75 or 80,000. And we actually, which is like the 50% of allowable that you could get, but they actually gave us more than that. It looks like we're gonna get closer to 100,000. And in my projection, I only calculated 20,000 because it's just, we couldn't count on that money actually coming in at the time. We just heard about this on Friday, so. I expect our numbers to be a little bit better. But with the 975,702, that gets our fund balance at a 3.9%. If we were to spend all that extension amount. Next slide. And then why is this budget extension needed? We had increased spending in federal funding, mainly our ESSER grants. Well, we had some financial troubles early on in the year. We ended up coding more things to ESSER and to help cover expenditures. And so we spent more ESSER money than we had planned on. We actually received a couple new grants that we weren't planning on having. The balanced calendar was one of them. We got a COVID workforce grant as well. Increase in food service costs. We had so far we spent over 100,000 more this year compared to last year. It's just inflation of costs. Increase in gas costs for our buses and our boiler. And then increase in level of services for our students. So speech went from a 1.0 to a 1.5 this year. We have 2 students at Candy Mountain receiving services. It's just necessary to meet the needs of our students. So they're higher than last year.
Can I ask on those top 2? So is this a cash flow timing issue then? So we're essentially, we've expended those funds, but we will have grant funding or federal funding for ESSER to reimburse for those. But we just don't have those funds on hand yet.
Yep. Some of it, yes. And then that'll also reflect on next year. We won't have as much ESSER funding to kind of fall back on. So just something for us to keep in mind as we plan the budget for next year. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to move into the debt service fund. So on the debt service fund, we have actually overexpended by just over $3,000, almost $4,000. And that was due to the interest payments were a little higher than what we had expected them to be. So we would have done an extension sooner, but after the first payment came out, that's when we realized we were actually over. So now we're doing the extension. So the way that it works is we only have 26,000 remaining of expenses for the year, but we actually have to budget more in the extension because the state will take the amount away that you're over by. They won't give you that amount. So you have to ask for more than what you really need. So we only need 26,000, but I'm asking for 40,000 in the extension. Knowing that that's going to give us enough buffer to cover
It
that.
lost me on where the state would take it away.
Okay, so if, let's say our expenses are, we budgeted for $10,000 and we spent 15,000. So we are over by $5,000. So if you asked for 20 grand they're only gonna give you 15 because you've already expended the extra 5. So they take away the difference of what you've already spent. Does that make more sense?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Next slide. So then I just kind of put together what the amount we're planning to spend, where our fund balance would end up. And then if the worst case, if for some reason we spent the 40,000. Based on our bus payments, I don't see how we would spend over the 26,985. Those payments are set in stone, so. Any questions there?
When's the last payment? This last one?
It's end of June,
Mhm.
so. Yep, it's coming up here soon. Next slide. So as I touched on, it's just to cover our remaining capacity. And then we're only planning to spend that $26,000 number, so I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. Any questions?
So what's our timing for 23-24 budget? Do we have something on the calendar for that yet, or?
It's in part of my report.
Okay.
How come you picked 900,000?
900,000. I kind of took a look at what we had for payroll already for the year, for kind of what's encumbered. And then I had my summer school calculation, figured that in. And then we had our average AP for the months, kind of went through that and then plugged that in each month. And then added a little bit of capacity just to make sure that the buffer, yeah, so.
Okay,
I think one of the things also, and I would remind the board. And I know this goes without saying from Drew's standpoint, but I'll go ahead and say it. The board is fully aware that if we were to come to any major emergency or major expenditure, we would bring it before the board anyway. Even though you've already granted, or we hope that you grant the extension. That is not to say that then that's $900,000 that the district has to play with, that there's no accountability for. Anything that looks out of the ordinary whatsoever would come back before the board.
Because I think last year we did a budget extension just because we thought we might need it. We didn't, right? But you're saying we need it this year.
We need it, yep. And not the whole thing, but we do, I mean, this does give us a buffer in case something does come up. Because we know HVAC can go out and that's spendy.
Still leaves that reserve in a pretty good place.
Better than what we were looking at.
better than expected. Any questions, comments? Okay, well, then we'll end the public hearing and restart our board meeting. Correct?
Yes.
Did we have to open to public comment during that? I think
Uh,
we did. Yeah,
If there was public to comment.
well, just so it
So-
goes in the minutes that we offered.
Yeah, I originally, when I looked up and saw Joni and. So I understand, but yes, I agree.
Yes, we don't have a way to have that electronically at this point, do we?
However, the budget extension and the public session was included in the agenda as it went out, so.
Right.
There were opportunities.
Oh, yeah, it was published in the newspaper on the 12th and the 20th.
Legal notice.
Yep.
Okay, well, we'll move on to unfinished business then.
We need to open it. Officially open it to public comment, Dale. The hearing.
Well, I already closed the hearing. Okay, public comment? All right, we'll close the public hearing then and go back into our regularly scheduled board meetings.
Thank you, Dale.
Moving on to unfinished business.
All right.
Policy 5882.
Yep.
6882.
6882 sale of real property, just asking for approval. This policy along with the next two are just policies that we could come up with a need in the near future, so wanted to get those on the books. As Julie mentioned last time, we've had them on our website for public review. And so we're just asking for approval of policy 6882 at this time.
I've read it a couple times, compared it to a couple other school districts, and it's almost word for word. Well, I don't have any questions. Anybody else?
I'll move to approve policy 6882, sale of real property.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye.
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 Moving on to site acquisition. 6905.
Correct, and again, second of our three policies. This is simply for site acquisition, potentially down the road if the school decides to acquire land for a potential new building. This is the policy we would use, and again, just asking for approval on policy 6905.
Okay, any comment, question on this one? Right. Approval needed.
I'll move to approve policy 6905 site acquisition.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye.
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 Last but not least. 6970, naming schools, use of mascots, logos, etc.
And the last of our policies is policy 6970. The only thing that's a little out of the ordinary, you can see there's a highlighted version, and that highlighted version is alternative language available for districts that include Indian country or in a county or adjacent to a county. It contains all or parts of a reservation or tribal trust lands, which we do not fall into that category, so that will not be a part of the final policy. But again, just asking for approval on policy 6970.
Was there any comments or questions? Okay,
I'll move to approve policy 6970, naming of schools, facilities, and teams, use of mascots, images, or logos.
I will second. Thanks for saying the whole thing.
You're welcome.
Just thinking, short title.
okay, moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye.
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 All right. Business is finished. On to new business. Okay, first we'll talk about the minutes from last meeting. See who was not here.
Rick was
It was-
Rick was gone with
Could have had it. That's okay.
convenient.
I'll move to approve the minutes from 6/23.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes passed. Resolution 4-2023. Budget extension. Okay, we've all talked about it. We understand it. Any final words?
No, I mean, I think we
Phrasing.
kind of went through it, so. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, we're here to approve it.
I move to approve resolution for 2023 for the 22-23 budget extension, general fund and debt service fund.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Is it a roll call? Okay, aye.
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 God, it's a resolution, isn't it?
Thank you.
All right, then we'll do an audit update.
Perfect. So we just finished up our audit, a couple weeks ago, and then we got the exit report, exit meeting set up. The district received a clean, unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion you can get. We did have a couple audit findings. Learning curves for us, so the first one was around our financial statements. So there was an entry done for our taxes receivable account. That has to be done every year. It was one that we were simply unaware of at the time, so we did not make it. And due to the dollar value, and being an audit finding, it has been corrected. And we resubmitted our books to OSPI, so that's all cleaned up now. Something we won't do again, so something we learned from and move on. The second one is around federal suspension and debarment requirements. So we had our milk distributor change in the middle of the school year. At that point, we should have looked on the SAM website, basically says whether they're in good standing or not. And at that point, there was some turnover. And I think it was in September, October last year that it happened, and we didn't have the paper on file that showed the date that the report was run. We had a report that was run from food service, but we didn't have a date stamp on it, so they couldn't prove whether we actually ran the report at the proper time or not to see that the company was in good standing. They were in good standing, so there's nothing questionable about the transactions that we've had with them. But it does result in a finding, and that means that we will have 40% of our federal program transactions audited the next 2 years versus the regular 20%. So there'll be keeping a little closer eye on that, which just something that we'll just want to make sure we take care of whenever we have a contract change like that. So I do want to point out that it's been a huge learning curve for me, and I think Mona at the same time, kind of in our new roles. And a lot happened in 3 different finance directors in the last year. So I think between the turnover, that's kind of what we explained in our findings, that with all the turnover, there was a lot going on and a lot of moving parts. So we're still learning. We're trying to do the best that we can, and we're not going to make these same mistakes again. So other than that, the audit was clean. They reviewed our professional learning, our sub-fund, supplemental contracts, enrollment reporting, accounts payable, our meeting minutes, and our financial condition. So any questions?
So yeah, I assume we've updated any checklists and procedures to account for those audit findings.
Yep.
And then if anyone wanted a copy of that audit report, is it available through the state auditor, or where would one find that?
Well, it's available through the state auditor's office,
On the website, yeah.
but we typically will post our audit results on our own website as well.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I was part of the audit exit meeting, and so I firmly agree with as Drew just phrased it, we had a lot of turnover. I feel we as a board and the district put a lot of resources behind making sure you had the proper support and getting you on up to speed. And I think we're confident in moving forward.
We just wanted to provide an update. So
Yep. Thank you.
Yep, and I go through a lot of those audits from SAM, the system for award management, and 2 findings is sometimes, no big deal to some other ones that we have 12 findings and 12 opportunities for improvement. So 2 findings is really pretty good. Neither one of them were red flags.
Well, and I would reiterate to something that we have spoken about a couple of different times, and that's the fact that I think we're in better shape right now to be able to internally process some of those things, given that we have 2 sets of eyes on them now on a consistent basis. I think with our former director of finance, she simply had so much experience under her belt. She knew what to look for and how to look for it. And in this case, I feel very confident having both Drew and Mona both sharing the chair, so to speak, that these are things that are going to be taken care of in the future.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you to Drew and Mona for your patience with me as I come in and ask questions, and just grateful for how patient and clear you make things for me and answer all my questions. And I really appreciate all your hard work, and I know it was stressful going through your first audit together, but great job, and thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move up to our assessment update and listen to all Tony's good words.
Well, thank you guys for moving this from the end of school to this month. That helped a lot. With that being said, STEM camp is extremely intense, and so I apologize for this being on paper and not on PowerPoint, which David just emailed me today and said, hey, you got it, I wrote it up. I'm thinking, okay, now you tell me. I wrote it all out. Anyway, okay, overall, our students have grown. With that being said, depending on which test you look at, some are really great tests and some are, oh crap, did they grow? So, yes, they all have made personal growth at some point. Let's start out with our DIBEL score that is done in our elementary from K5. K1 and kindergarten and first, we do them 3 times a year. And then second through fifth, we do twice a year. DIBELS is done basically for our LAP funding to provide our RTI services. With that, we had, when you talk about the kindergartners, we only had 2.8% of our kindergartners enter kindergarten at kindergarten entrance level.
Did you say?
2.8%. Yes. At the end of the year in spring, 57% of our kinders were at or above kindergarten end of the year benchmarks. So that's nice growth for them. First grade, there is that summer slide tremendously, because at the beginning of first grade, there was 6.8% that were at grade level for the beginning of the year grade level. And at the end, we're back up to the 58.8% at our year benchmark. Second grade, we had 20% carryover to being at grade level, with 38% at the end of the year at grade level. Third grade, we had 19% beginning of the year and ended up with 52%. Fourth grade was 16% and ended up with 35% at grade level. And our fifth grade had 10% enter at fifth grade beginning grade level and ended with 46.5% at grade level. Okay, grades 2 through 5th, it is purely fluency, reading fluency. So it's a 1-minute cold read that's timed. And then we take the average score of 3 of those. With the first and kinders, from kindergarten, it's letter recognition and sounds. And with first grade, it's basically your fry list. It's the first 500 words that you learn to read. Okay. From our DIBELS, we then do our, basically DIBELS is our triage, where we triage everybody. And then we do our core, we do our RTI response to intervention core assessment there. And this year we were only able to serve 98 students. 4 of those students ended up moving out of district. So we had a total of 94 students. Of those 94 students, 21% of them graduated from our RTI program, meaning they came in not knowing maybe their vowels, their diphthongs, their blends, and by going through that somewhere in our every 6 weeks where we test, they literally went from not knowing to knowing. Then we would do another one to make sure that carried through. And then if they passed twice, then we would exit them out. Unfortunately, this year we were only able to do 94 students. And that was rotating kids as we went. Whereas last year we served about 100 and so, but we lost 2 parents due to other responsibilities. So that's kind of where we are for. Dibbles is also our triage for our dyslexia screening. State requires that all new students to the district K3 be screened for dyslexia. We are not diagnosing dyslexia at all. We are just screening for possibility and tendencies. Of that, our kindergartners were all tested because they're all new students, basically. And 25 of our little kinders were flagged as having dyslexic tendencies. Letters were then sent home to the parents of those that we tested, and with recommendations of what next steps they could be, seeing a pediatrician, seeing an eye doctor. Unfortunately, in the Tri-Cities, there's really not much. If they want to see a dyslexic specialist, they have to go all the way to Spokane, which is not good for this area, since we are such a large area. We actually had 5 first through third graders that needed to be tested, and only 1 came in as flagged for needing the letter sent home as having dyslexic tendencies. And then I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later, their IEP showed up. So it was, oh, they have a confirmed case of it in another state. So it's glad that our testing works. Speaking of which, OSPI called us, Lisa Stady and myself, and they said they wanted to come down and visit. Unfortunately, the gal wasn't able to, but she did meet with us via Zoom. And they were doing an interest survey of how we were handling our dyslexic screening and testing, and then our response to their intervention. We went through our process of screening, how it is actually the DIBELS test, which is one that they accept, the state accepts, our RAND-RAS test, which is another one that they accept because they do 2 different things. And then the teacher recommendation, because dyslexia is not just the flipping of letters that most of us think of. There's a whole slew of questions we ask the teachers to look for. And then when we told her that once we identify using those 3 things, we then contact parents. Usually there's a history of it within the parents. And then they are flagged for a response to intervention. We actually have a para, and those are the kids that she sees are our little dyslexic flagged students. With that being said, we don't do kinder right off the bat because they're still learning their letters and stuff. And that's what our RTI is learning letters. So we have picked those up in 1st grade. Lisa Stady is also taking additional dyslexic classes. She is working on a certificate. It's not an endorsement, but a certificate in dyslexic reading teaching, so that she can better serve our dyslexic flag students. Okay, MAP test. This is our 2nd year of MAP testing. We MAP test all 2nd through high school. Not every high schooler took the MAP test, but I know their 9th, 10th, and majority of the 11th graders did. Some seniors were asked to take it. And with the MAP test, again, our students grew. With that being said, we have a large percentage that are below the national average. When you look at our scores, it's kind of like, okay, but that's compared with the nation, kind of like an SBAC. We also tested in the winter, we included our first graders so that they would have a baseline score. And then we tested them again in the spring. First grade teachers were quite impressed with the growth. Last year, they didn't test at all, really. And so they were quite impressed. And now this year, this coming school year, they want to also test in the fall. So they want the 3 scores. We also tested the kindergartners. It's like herding cats. The kinder teacher said, well, you know, we think that maybe winter would also be a good time. So we have 2 to show for growth. They definitely do not want to test in the fall because they're just getting their kids. And like we said, there's only 2.8 that are at benchmark. So math, we are spreading it out. We also had a professional development for teachers for the math reports. And both with middle school and high school. And that turned out very well because then they were able to actually take students' grades and it breaks it down into where my student is, each individual student, where that student is, and where I need to take them next. So that was very appropriate. I also had a couple of summer school teachers that asked for that. Here's my class list. Could you tell me where could I have reports so that I can see where in reading I need to take them next, where in, so I can continue their growth. Even though our scores look kind of dismal across the board, every student showed some growth. Not all the same type of growth, but every student showed growth. But for example, and I just did really kind of one grade level, 82% of our 4th graders are below the national average when it comes to math, and 73% are below when it comes to reading. And the other grades look about like that. Middle school is harder because they're not in individual classes. It's more of a whole group, and it's just that the math was like, oh my gosh, going nuts trying to figure out how many kids there are and what the percentage and everything. So, but as a whole, they're about the same. 3rd grade though has shown the greatest growth when it came to reading. And that is a lot to do, we feel, to our new reading program and the fact that they implemented a walk to read program this year. So that was very nice. And they also showed quite a bit of growth when it came to the DIBELS test as well. SBAC scores are not in yet. We completed the SBAC for all the grade levels that required it. We had several students that were frequent flyers when it came to absenteeism. So we had about 47 that I had to go into Cedars and excuse for either absenteeism or parents just refused to have them take the test. But a lot of the kids, they weren't here. The springtime, they just didn't come. WIDA. Our WIDA test is for our ELL Spanish population. And we do WIDA screening all year long for new students to see if they qualify. I gotta tell you, that WIDA test is hard. I don't know if I could pass it, and I'm a native English speaker. That is done basically K-12. We had a team this year that went in and tested 6-12. It worked out fairly well. We got everybody but the absentee kids the ones that were chronically absent, tested. We had a couple of the homeschool kids, parents bring them in. So we did really well. OSPI, sent things saying that, 2 booklets did get turned in. These booklets were unused. They were lost in the mail. So they actually closed our case yesterday and I was ever so grateful. It's like, yes, okay. So that is there. Our sped population takes the WAAIMS or the WAAIMS test, and that's for our life skill students, and I also take the WITA alternate. And then our sped teachers are the ones that administer that test. So that's it. Oh, and then test coming up is we have universal high cap testing. So that's another one we get to do next year. So, and I'll get more information on that as it's coming down the pipe, but that will be for our 3rd, 1st, and 4th graders. I think that's where it
Got
goes.
some options.
Yes. So. Anyway, questions?
Is there anything that we should be doing to help prevent some of that or mitigate some of that summer slide you mentioned?
Summer school helps, and it's just year-round school would be nice. A flexible calendar would be nice. I mean, there is lots of data out there that year-round schools or schools with flexible calendars, they tend to have less summer slag. Getting parents to turn off the TV and put books in front of their kids, but yeah, even my own kids wouldn't do that. So it's hard to figure out what's going to happen to the summer slag. And we've had teachers that, you teach them all year, especially like with math. I would teach them on math, and then the next year, it's like they go, oh, well, she never taught us that. And it's like, no, we went over your multiplication facts. No, you've been going over it since 3rd grade. So you can't remember 5 times 7 now, in your 8th grade, what's going on. So
Yeah, it might vary by class, but do we have any like take home packets, like work on this over the summer to not lose your?
I think the short answer is yes. I mean, there are obviously materials that we can provide, and there is so much available online for people who have access. And that doesn't help all of our families, but I think one of my takeaways after this school year is really going to be a task that I worked with Joni on as well as David, because one of the things that I really want to be able to do, as Joni was talking about calendar options, the board's very aware that we're going to start having discussions around a balanced calendar, which could conceivably shorten up that summer a bit. Not enough to take it away, but one of the things I really want to be able to work on, and I know David is listening, so I know he's also recording this, so he can't get out of it. One of the sets of numbers as I look at these, and I look at our number of kids according to Dibbles that are coming in fall with a significant number not at grade level. So let me just pick on 1st grade, for instance, where we started the year with 6.8% meeting standard. We ended the year with 58%, and that's well and good. And now I'm curious to see, where do those 58% kids end up next fall when we test them as 2nd graders? So one of the things that I'd like to be able to do is, I know we have the data, and it's really going to be working with David to get it into whether it's a program or a tool, to be able to pull out the cohorts of kids. Out of that 58%, I want to see how many of them stayed when they test again for 2nd grade. And we know that the summer slide is a thing. We know it exists. But what percentage is the drop? Of our kids who weren't at grade level, for instance, we would make the assumption they aren't going to be at grade level then when they test in the fall anyway. My real key, though, is if I'm going to pick on that grade, we're 58% at the end of 1st grade. of those 58%, then what do we see happening to them at the beginning of second grade? I think that would then be a good starting point to help our discussion as we look to alternatives, to be able to look at real numbers of this is what we all talked about summer slide. This is what it actually looks like and the numbers of kids that we're potentially impacting.
The MAP test also can give us a really good indicator. You can do a student profile. I couldn't pull any of those because of purple laws. They did it with blacking out names and everything. It's just been a lot of paper and all this stuff. But what it does is because we now have gotten 2 years, it actually, you can see students going up, and then boom, oh, here's fall again, and then they go up. Yes, they're ending more than they're ending here, which was last year, but yet they were here last fall or last spring, and yet in the fall, they're down here again. And MAP, they take into consideration of the slower slide. So with their bar is actually there for it. So it is, once you graph it out, it's amazing. The other thing with the Dibbles is we went from Dibbles 6 last year to, they no longer do Dibbles 6, it's now Dibbles 8. And when they did Dibbles 8, they also raised the bar. So it's like, oh, after the pandemic, let's raise the bar. That's makes sense. But if you don't raise the bar, kids aren't going to step up to it. So.
Well, you mentioned the pandemic. I was going to ask you, any of these testings, do we have data from beforehand where we're seeing where we could
We
assess
used to do
how?
STAR testing
Right.
before the pandemic, then afterwards, now we do MAP, and so it's kind of like apples and tangerine, or oranges and tangerines. I mean, they're close, but no, not exactly. Dibbles is the only thing that's been consistent. Unfortunately, we no longer have Dibbles 6 information to look and see where our kids were then to where they are now. Because I don't know why, I just can't access it more. So, which is terrible. But, yeah. Also a problem is we have a lot of level 1 ELL speakers, especially in the elementary. So, and when we look at this, we also need to take that into consideration.
Yeah, is it possible to segregate the data and look at growth for ELL versus?
We can do that. Especially in math, because they can take the math test in Spanish. And with kinder, first and second, it's read to them. So like for the math testing, it's actually read to them. They don't have to reading, and the reading part is taken out of it. So they're just looking at the math. And then with the reading, all the directions are read to them, all of the questions are read to them, but they actually have to repeat the passage on the math test. So yeah, just helping. And even though they're speaking English at school, there's probably still home language is still Spanish. And I know when I'm speaking a second language, it's really hard for me to translate back and forth, and so I read slower and stuff like that.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
I think this, though, and this is one of the problems with data, in that there's a certain ease in not knowing exactly where your kids are, because you're never able to really pinpoint them. And I think the board was very wise at the time that we went to MAP, knowing even post-pandemic that our scores were not going to be good, but there simply is no other way to realistically attack our problems if we can't diagnose what our real problems are. And I have no doubt, and I'll follow up with it later as well, but we just signed off on our contract for our next year of MAP. So I think that while the road is fraught with a little bit of pain and anguish at times, I don't see us going back to a time where we can't specifically tell you where our weaknesses are and where we need to achieve at higher levels and what we're doing to try to get there. So that leaves me very hopeful for the future. And I know Joni has dived into this role feet first. And the encouraging thing to me is the first year that Joni was working in assessment, people were coming to her and asking her for the information. Now people are asking her, how do I get the information? And we're finally seeing those teachers coming forward and saying, now that I know the information, how do I change my teaching practices to best serve my kids? And none of that is possible without having access to the real data.
Or are
So-
there gaps in my curriculum that are
Correct.
being covered by?
Where do I need to stress the
Very much so.
structure?
And one of the reasons, Josh, the district moved from the STAR test to MAP was quite frankly, that we get significantly more information from the MAP than we ever got from the STAR test.
Well, everybody hated the STAR test.
Yes,
That too.
yeah,
I was also told that it wasn't as reliable. I believe the STAR test is only about 20 questions, and you don't really get a good picture of it.
And there's 44 for the test.
so thank you again, Joni, really appreciate it.
thank you.
We'll be taking steps.
Yep, appreciate your detailed analysis too. All right, we'll move into capital improvement, community traffic and safety project.
Thank you, Dale. Some really good news. The board is aware because the board was there. At our work session, we had the presentation that was done by BLRB Architects and Greg McCracken. Greg was able to contact me last week and he gave us some preliminary numbers that he felt were not simply shots in the dark. They were very conservative, given to him by a gentleman's firm who is doing some similar type work in another small district. The bottom line is that the presentation that he gave, as you remember, and we don't have any visuals to this, but we will hopefully tomorrow, because one of the things I'm going to ask the board is that we go ahead and do some public outreach with our project. Basically, the project can be done, meaning the new bus loop, a redo of the middle school parking, and a redo of the elementary school parking with a connection around from the middle school to the elementary at $2.5 million. It came in, quite frankly, at a price that was surprising to me. I did not expect to be able to do both. If you remember, we were talking about a phase 1A, which was the middle school and the parking, or the bus loop around ECAP. And then the 1B being the extension of that mushroom creation of some real parking space and a one-way turn onto State Route 225, Horn Drive. So the entire project could be done in one phase for $2.5 million. As the board knows, one of the things that we were considering is we wanted an update from Corey at DA Davidson about what were the types of funding that we could raise if the board decides to go forward with a capital levy. And right now at $1.23, which is the same rate as the current bond that will be expiring this year. So if we were to keep that tax rate and ask for a 2-year capital levy, that capital levy would fund up to $2.95 million. So it would more than pay for the phase 1 of some site improvements. With that being said, I had the opportunity today to meet with Bill Reed, who's been acting as the interim mayor, and Alan Spink, who's the county engineer, or excuse me, the city engineer. They were both very excited by the potential for this project to happen. And I stressed with them that we were taking into consideration not simply access to our school and traffic flow for the school's sake, but also the improvement that it would make from an infrastructure standpoint to the entire community. One of the things that Bill shared was that the city council hears often, in fact, one of their major complaints is traffic on Horn, specifically from about 7:15 to 8:15 in the morning, and again 2:15 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So our release and our drop off and release times are what is causing some of the biggest headaches in Benton City traffic flow. So they were highly encouraged by this. In fact, Bill went so far as to say that he saw no negative from this project whatsoever from the city standpoint. Alan was there because, as the board is also aware, one of our potential projections would be to extend Fay Avenue all the way through, goes by the baseball fields that Joni and the Lions Club oversees, would be, but to take Fay, go right by the LDS church, continue past the field and then merge into 13th. We know that is a huge mess in the morning because you have seemingly a lot of parents who just want to come in, drop off their student, and then flip a UE, either going through the LDS church parking lot to do so, or just backing up and making a quick U-turn. So they are going to have an estimate on total project costs for an extension of Fay, which I would then bring to the board. But of course, we would enter into negotiations with the city because that would be a shared cost of some sort. The idea being, though, that whatever this project moving forward, were the board to decide to go this route and ask the taxpayers for a capital levy in November or in February 24, the understanding that these would not just be short-term fixes, that this would be an overall part of a planned remodel of the elementary school or a replacement to the elementary school. One of the things that Bill shared with me was that this next Monday will be the official end to the moratorium on building within the city limits. And there are currently 75 approved permits for homes. One of them is the North River area, which is the newest area on the way out of town, and then behind it more towards the river, hence the North River. And then another project of 25 homes that's down off of Kendall, I believe. And that one is kind of up in the air because they had a late request for an extension on some permits. And they weren't 100% sure where that's landing, but they do know 75 permits now for new homes. They are very aware of the DNR sale potentially happening. And while there will still be a moratorium on building in that DNR land, the primary reason behind it is to prevent an incursion by a large box store, for lack of a better term. So a Costco, a Target, a large store just showing up out there in somebody's backyard. They foresee it being in urban development for homes at some point, just not allowable as far as, heavy industrial or heavy commercial. So all those things being said, they invited me to present our proposal on July 10th, which is the Monday we would normally have our first school board meeting. So the first Tuesday of the month, the city council is hosting a project work session and inviting people with potential projects to present. And it would be my intention to go ahead and present to the city council at that time. And one of my focuses, and I shared this with both Bill and Alan, is the first time that someone shoots holes in our project or what we're thinking, should not be at the ballot box. We need to know these things prior to a board vote on a resolution to move a ballot forward. I would also say that in the meantime, between July 10th and the 24th, which is our next board meeting, schedule a couple of community forums to be able to get people in. This would also go up on our website later this week as a potential project for people to start commenting on. Long story short, I'm very encouraged by the pricing. And I think that when you look at a project like this, anytime then you start looking at the potential for delays, adding anywhere between 20 and 30% to construction costs, build costs per year, the farther out we push it. We may want to take a hard look and really get a sense of some community feedback. And then it would be my recommendation at the next board meeting to have a discussion and decide if we want to make a move forward. And while the board would not need to theoretically vote on a resolution at that time, I think it would be in the board's best interest to either make a decision at that time or in mid-August at the latest to put it on the ballot. But I think by the 24th, we should have a good idea with some community feedback of this is kind of where people are leaning. I was very encouraged by both Bill and Alan's response to it. They said they felt it was a well thought out plan and would definitely eliminate a lot of the issues on Coral right now. So I came away very happy about that meeting.
What was the date of that meeting? The 10th, you said?
July 10th is what they told me, and I would have to send them our visuals, so our maps, our proposals and everything like that by the end of the week. But although I don't need a vote or anything like that, I'd like to proceed with that.
Yeah, that'd be a good move forward.
So then I think at that point, it's simply a matter of getting this out in front of as many people as we can, getting some poster boards made, putting them around the community in some high traffic areas and getting people to take a look. I think the other real good, as far as I'm concerned, is the potential to do this without a true tax increase. It would simply be a continuation of the same tax that they're paying off this year for the high school. An extension of that for 2 years would get us this project and we'd be done.
No tax increase.
Yep.
The other thing was we ought to contact the state and see what funding or proposals they have that they could assist.
Yep.
Maybe a left turn lane or something they could throw in too.
Yep, agreed.
Because they, they'll have a new year, they start in July, so.
Yeah.
Maybe they can put something in.
Get on the list for the new fiscal year before everybody else does. So that's my update on the project. I'm encouraged and ready to take a few steps forward before coming back and discussing this again on the 24th of July.
All right. Well, that moves us to board comments. Any comment on that? Thought? Well, I'm glad we got through another year of financial duress and success.
Agreed.
And looking forward to some trying to do improvements. Other comment? We'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Well, thank you. And most of these items have been touched on in one form or another. Just to give the board a quick update, summer school's up and going. We have 88 kids who are registered in the elementary. I don't have final numbers yet from the high school, but I'm going to get those and get them to you. And we have, out of those 88, we have 31 participating in the STEM camp at WSU. And while the school year is out, that doesn't mean that our principals haven't been busy because they've been doing interviews almost daily for staff for next year from the positions we have that are still unfilled from our internal moves. I do want to give a quick shout out to the Red Cross and to our local fire departments. Because we know that our local fire department was stretched pretty thin back on the 13th. When we had our big blaze across the highway, and then we had another one start, literally, we were watching that one on Red Mountain. But the Red Cross came in, they called me about 5:30 and said they were gonna be at the high school at 6 o'clock to open up an evacuation center, which is something that we always prepare for. But for the first time in the 5 years I've been here, they actually made the phone call. So we had about 20 people who came and hung out in our parking lot for a while. We had 5 RVs at one point. And though we didn't have the need for full-blown shelter in place or anything like that for the night, I thought it was a good opportunity for us to kind of put to the test some of the plans that we've all talked about and heard about. And things went exceptionally smooth. And there was a lot of good reaction from our community members who were able to come by and speak to the Red Cross and speak to me and speak to some other staff that we had there. So luckily, thanks to our fire crews, we didn't have a lot of loss. My understanding is only one home actually got taken out in fire that was in Benton City proper. So kudos to them for a good job. Finally, I would just make a recommendation. I'd like to tentatively schedule a budget workshop for July 14th, which is the second Friday of July. Tentatively on the 14th, and then we can obviously we've been having them at noon. I don't know if this would give Teddy enough time to potentially do a morning. If not, we can.
Well, I'm not in school, but I won't be here at all.
You won't be here at all on the 14th. So my guess is on the 14th, we could probably do a morning, say 9 o'clock, and give Drew and Mona the opportunity to present their draft budget, answer any questions the board might have before we need to take it to formal adoption.
You okay to miss it?
I don't care. I don't care.
When are you leaving, Teddy?
I'm leaving on the 3rd. I'll be home on the 18th.
That's a nice vacation.
That's a nice vacation. Congratulations. No, if you were able to join us, even on a phone call, we could set that up for you if you wanted to just listen.
Okay.
But I feel like we need to give the opportunity in a public forum to get some questions answered and anything the board might have, as well as any community members who might want to show up.
Sounds good.
Would 10 a.m. work? I'm looking at my work schedule here. Sorry.
10 a.m. or work fine.
I'm good with 10. 10 to noon.
Yep.
What time zone are you gonna be in?
I will be an hour ahead.
Oh,
I'll be in Montana.
Good. So we'll tentatively book that for the board and book the board room for 10 to noon on Friday, July 14th. Okay, and that's all I have.
all right. No other questions, comments? Okay, well then we'll pause for executive session, RCW pursuant to RCW 423110, performance of public employees for 30 minutes. No business to follow, and then we'll adjourn. Thank you, Joni, especially. That was a lot